What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. We have to talk about some Raptors and some news, and that is Caris Levert. Now, this was posted by Shoutout to Rap City. Now, we got news about this last week that the Raptors are interested in Caris Levert. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean we will acquire him, but you never know. He is a name that has been linked to the Raptors in the past, and for today's video, I want to break down these rumors and talk about some of the positives as well as the negatives of acquiring Caris Levert and some of the names we could potentially throw in a trade to acquire Caris Levert, as well as break down some rumors surrounding Chris Boucher as well. Now, again, this is a little bit of older news. I didn't really get a chance to break this news down, but in terms of Chris Boucher, now obviously we know he's a free agent, which is why the Raptors could be looking to trade him. But for today's video, I want to break down kind of what the Raptors should look for and some of the pieces they should try to acquire when trying to trade Chris Boucher. So I'm going to break all of that down in today's video. So if you guys are ready to watch, make sure to hit the like button, as it does help get this video out. And if you want to hit the subscribe button as well, we're close to 2,900 subscribers. We recently hit 2,800 subscribers and have you guys to thank for that. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel. So for today's video, the shout out goes on to John Jakelick, who is a two-time champion, trivia champion. He is looking for his three-peat, so you guys can dethrone him in the comment section. But John, thank you so much for supporting this channel. Now let's break some of those positives down of acquiring Caris Levert. When we talk about the positives, we know the Raptors bench has been terrible. We saw a little glimpse of that when Nick Nurse just absolutely refused to play some of the bench guys, and he did essentially a six-man rotation against Miami. Now, this is big because if we do acquire Caris Levert, he does help the bench out a lot. We obviously are terrible in bench production. We're getting essentially no point production outside of Chris Boucher from our bench. And Caris Levert can come in and just really be a microwave off of the bench for the Raptors. He's great at scoring. That is his strong point. So he can really help the Raptors in that area. But also because he can play the shooting guard and small forward position, which the Raptors don't really have depth in. Now, I know you can say you can potentially play Yuta Watanabe and some other guys off of the bench, but if you have Caris Levert, who's listed at 6'6", 210 pounds, he's also very young. He's 27 years old, so it's not like we're acquiring someone who's very old, and he's on a very reasonable contract of $18 million. He's locked in until the end of next season as well. So if the Raptors do acquire him, I think it gives Nick Nurse another option, not only off of the bench, but just in terms of how Nick Nurse likes to use his bench on a tight 8-9 man rotation. I think having Caris Levert, you can play him with some of the starters when Gary Trent Jr. goes to the bench and not lose a lot of offensive production. He's also a decent defender as well. So I think if the Raptors were to acquire Caris Levert, I think there's a lot of pluses and bonuses to acquiring him. He'd probably fit in with the Raptors well. He can provide some offensive power off of the bench, as well as just play with some of the starters as well. So I think those are some of the positives when we talk about Caris Levert. And we have to talk about some negatives as well. Now, obviously, he does average 18 points per game, but he's also taking 15.7 shots per game. And he is currently starting with the Indiana Pacers. And I know we like to take a look at stats a lot and kind of glam over the fact that he's averaging 18 points. He will be, no doubtedly, a great piece for our bench, but it's important to note, if the Raptors do acquire him, like I said, our small ball lineup is kind of locked in Scotty, Pascal, OG, Gary, and Fred. So he's very likely going to be coming off of the bench for the Raptors. And he's not essentially going to average 18 points. We do need to realize that he's not going to be getting the same amount of shots. He's not going to be shooting as much, and he's not going to be as involved on the offensive side if he's going to be playing off of the bench for the Raptors. I can see him averaging somewhere around 14, 15 points a game off the bench, which is still really good. But just in terms of what you talk about Caris Levert, you do have to talk about his usage rate as well. Where you look at the Indiana Pacers and Caris Levert this season, his usage rate is 26.9, which is actually higher than Pascal and Fred VanVleet as well. And that is quite low considering his previous seasons as well. So when you talk about Caris Levert, we do need to take a lot of those things into consideration. His usage rate is incredibly high. He's taking a high volume of shots to give you 18 points per game. And another thing we absolutely have to talk about Caris Levert is his injuries. He's only 27 years old, but he has yet to play one full season in the NBA. And besides his second season in the NBA, when you take a look at the games played for him, he has yet to even play 60 games. Now, obviously, he's doing pretty decent this season, but you can't deny the fact that injuries are definitely a big part of when you try to acquire a player. You don't want to acquire a player just to have him play 50 games the entire season. So that is something the Raptors would have to keep in mind if they're trading for Caris Levert. As well as he's a decent three-point shooter. I wouldn't say he's a great three-point shooter. As you Take a look at his 3-point percentages the last couple seasons as well. But in terms of what the Raptors would have to give up, when we talk about Caris Levert, now, when we talk about the Pacers in particular and what they're looking for Caris Levert, they're essentially looking for a package similar to Miles Turner. Now, they did say the team is reportedly seeking a first round pick and a good young player in exchange for Caris Levert. Now, obviously, when we talk about Caris Levert, and we talk about Dragic as well, because he makes the same amount as Caris Levert. They're both making around $18 million, so automatically you have to throw in Goran Dragic for a trade. But obviously, the Pacers aren't going to trade just Goran Dragic alone. So if the Raptors do want to acquire Caris Levert, I think you would have to give up a first round pick they're looking for, as well as potentially a young player like Malachi Flynn or maybe even Justin Champagnie. Now, the question you have to ask yourself before we jump on the idea of trading for Caris Levert is, you're essentially going to be locked in salary cap situation wise. You're going to be locked in next season as well. Caris Levert has an expiring contract the following season. So although it's great that you do acquire Caris Levert, is a first round pick really worth giving up? Are the Raptors contending at the moment is the big question I'm trying to say here. Is you definitely have to take into consideration. Obviously, the thought and idea of trading Caris Levert is great, but you do have to take into consideration a first round pick is a lot to give up for someone who you're essentially going to play for 1.5 seasons. Given his injuries, we don't even know how many games he will be able to play. But obviously, the Raptors do need some bench help. I don't know if it's worth giving up a first round pick for Caris Levert. And we know he's had a hot market. He's going to be talked about around the NBA. And a lot of the NBA teams are obviously looking to acquire someone like Caris Levert. So we do have to keep those things into mind and into consideration when we talk about Caris Levert and how he would impact the Raptors, but also just what the Raptors would have to give up in terms of Caris Levert. At the moment, the Raptors are retooling. I think we should just let some of our guys develop. We definitely do need help on our bench, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it's worth giving up all of those assets for someone like a Caris Levert. And like I said, this isn't a championship or bust season. If it was, maybe then you give up a first round pick for Caris Levert. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense to give up a first. And ultimately, I don't think the Raptors will acquire Caris Levert. Now, let's break down our second rumor, which was Chris Boucher. Now, Chris Boucher, I have honestly changed my opinion on trading Chris Boucher. And I'm not saying I would not trade Chris Boucher. He is 29 years old. He's an expiring contract. He's definitely going to be paid a lot more than what he's getting paid, $7 million this season. But in terms of what the Raptors should look for when we do trade Chris Boucher, personally speaking, if we're going to trade Chris Boucher, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to trade Chris Boucher for second round picks. And personally, I would actually keep Chris Boucher over acquiring 1 second round draft pick, because when you talk about the Raptors' youth and we talk about some of the bench pieces they already have, I feel like we have enough young guys as it is. And I touched a little bit upon this in my last video, but in terms of Malachi Flynn, in terms of having guys like Justin Champagnie, we have Delano Banton, Scotty Barnes, Precious Achiuwa. A lot of these guys need to be playing minutes and need to develop. I just don't see how it makes sense for a team that already has a really weak bench and is dependent on the growth of some of these young guys to acquire a second round pick, who, by the way, is going to take several years to develop, and we're going to have to play them in the G League. So I just don't see why that would make a lot of sense for the Raptors. There's only so many young players that you can keep accumulating on this roster and develop in the G League. I think we have enough youth as it is. Obviously, I would still keep my first round picks, and I'd obviously try to develop those players, but second round draft picks are really hard to develop, and it takes several years to draft, or I should say develop them. But that is one of the reasons personally I would not want to trade a second round pick for Chris Boucher. If we do get a young player in return for Chris Boucher, I think it makes a lot more sense. I know it's going to be hard to acquire a first round pick as much as us Raptors fans may want it. I just don't see that happening. So unless the Raptors are trading Chris Boucher for, let's say, a couple guys making $4 million and are locked into next season, I just don't see a deal that makes sense for Chris Boucher. Not that I think that a deal can't be done. I just don't think the Raptors may get what they're looking for back in Chris Boucher. They definitely won't be getting a first round pick. And unless they're getting a young player who even is an expiring contract, like an example would be Gary Trent Jr., how we acquired him for Norman Powell. If the Raptors feel like they can definitely re-sign that player, I think they absolutely should. They should potentially look to acquire a playmaker off of the bench. And again, depending on Chris Boucher, depends a lot on what we get back for Goran Dragic as well. So that is one thing we do need to keep in mind. If the Raptors do acquire, let's say, a couple decent bench pieces for Goran Dragic, then it makes sense to trade Chris Boucher for, a pick or two or whatever you get back. But in terms of just bench help, I think that is what the Raptors should look for. Because outside of Chris Boucher, we have absolutely zero bench scoring. I mean that in a respectful way to Utah Sweet and some of the other bench guys, but I don't think Nick Nurse can consistently rely on some of those guys. So if you're trading Chris Boucher, you're gonna have no bench. So I think trading him for some bench pieces makes sense. Like I said, guys, it depends on various different factors, such as what you're getting back for Goran Dragic, and we'll have to go on from there. But just some of the ideas surrounding Caris Levert and Chris Boucher, these are my personal thoughts on whether or not the Raptors should acquire Caris Levert and what they would have to give up. And I gave you guys some of my positives and negatives as well. And we broke down the Chris Boucher rumors as well. But I do want to hear from you guys. Do you agree with some of my thought processes of what we should try to acquire for Chris Boucher and my thoughts on Caris Levert? Do you agree with some of my thoughts? Let me know in the comment section. And I do have a trivia question for you guys today. And the trivia question for today is, which of these players have not made the all NBA, or I should say all rookie second team? So is it A, Terrence Davis? Is it B, Terrence Ross? Is it C, Jonas Valanciunas? Or is it D, Jamario Moon? So the first person to answer this trivia question correctly in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. And I do have a bonus clip for you guys, which is a really awesome clip of Scotty Barnes and some of our younger guys wishing Gary Trent Jr. a happy birthday on the airplane. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this clip, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.
Trent, you know, it's a special day. It's his birthday, so we have a special crew here today to sing a song for him. Beat Double Don. And Scotty. Alright, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Gary. Happy birthday to you.
Okay, appreciate y'all love.